Welcome to For the Love of Books, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries. Hi everyone, welcome back to the North Lanarkshire Libraries podcast For the Love of Books. My name is Chris Wilson, the E-Services Librarian, and we have reached the final episode of Season 3 of our podcast. I can't believe we've already reached Season 3 already, but today's episode is going to feature an interview with the fantastic author Sarah Hilary, best known for her series featuring D.I. Marnie Rome, but she is about to release a new standalone book called Fragile, which is fantastic. So we have had, I was lucky enough to catch up with her, chat about the book and hear a little bit about what she's been doing as well throughout the last year, and also get some recommended reads from her as well. So listen closely and see what you think. So, Sarah, thank you for joining us on our podcast today. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to do it. What I'll do is I'll kind of tell our readers a little bit about you in case they're not too familiar with you. So you are kind of sort of well known for being a crime novelist, and your debut novel, Someone Else's Skin, won the Theakstons Crime Novel of the Year. And it's the start of a series that you were writing with D.I. Marnie Rome, and it's now on its sixth entry, with the last one being Never Been Broken. And while I was kind of looking into a few things about you, I also found that you are a killer woman officially, which I thought was quite interesting. You are part of the Killer Women Collective, which is also a kind of collection of women crime writers. Some of the other notable names that I saw amongst that was Ellie Griffiths and Paula Hawkins and Sharon Bolton, amongst many others, which was very interesting. And your new book, which is the one we're going to talk about in this podcast, is Fragile, which will be due out on the 10th of June. So not long after we put this podcast out. So it must be very exciting to kind of get a new book out for you.
Definitely, especially since it's with a new publisher. It's a first standalone. So yeah, really interesting, slightly nerve-wracking times.
Fantastic. And obviously we're talking about kind of nerve-wracking time. We have been living in a very strange times. How have you kind of managed to kind of survive the lockdowns of late? What have you been up to and what's got you by and things like that?
Yeah, well, I think just most recently I've just been, what a privilege it is to be able to see our loved ones again, isn't it? I mean, yeah. I've been able to go and sit in my mum's garden, haven't seen nearly enough of her. And it was just so lovely, like this last weekend, I spent some time with my younger brother and my sister-in-law in their garden, and it's, I think in some ways it's those things that we sort of took for granted and maybe didn't make enough time for because we took them for granted. It's like, we can go and you can go and see your loved ones anytime you want to, so you don't maybe make plans the way you would. So that has been, just recently it's been made me aware, how grateful I am for those things. And like an open library that you just took for granted, or a long walk in the woods that aren't on your doorstep. I saw my first bluebells last weekend in a wood, and that just seemed even more special now than it did last time I saw some, before all of this.
Yeah.
But sort of talking about, back when all of this started, when, a year ago or just over a year ago when we were first in lockdown, I had, like a lot of other writers, I think, I did lose my word mojo. There was a period then when I couldn't write. And almost more frighteningly, I couldn't read either. I couldn't, get stuck into a book, get lost in a book, which is so important when you're a writer. It's almost more painful than not being able to write your own words, is not being able to read your favorite writer's words, but it was a massive relief when that came back. So that was maybe 2 to 3 months maximum when I was not really feeling it, because there was so much to be anxious about. I mean, let's be fair, there was so much noise, wasn't there? There was the news, there was the press, there was there was all of that, and a writer, we do need an amount of silence so that our ideas can take form, and an amount of nothingness and an amount of sort of steady ground under our feet, so that we can create these, you know, these strange, chaotic worlds that we create. But they have, you know, you have to feel quite safe yourself in your own current world to really build those edifices, you know. So yeah, but it came back, and what a relief. And then once it came back, the writing, you know, I wrote. I think that's really what saw me through the subsequent lockdowns, especially the winter months, when you couldn't just sit in your garden if you were lucky enough to have one. So, you know, and I'm reading, you know, so those are the things that got me through. Ultimately, it was the reading and the writing.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about how you can struggle a lot about the creative side of things at the start, because I have asked a few people that, and a few people have kind of said similar things, and it's interesting because maybe kind of on the surface you might have thought like it would be a perfect time to kind of get creative and things, because obviously we are kind of been stuck in our homes and things, but like you say, there is obviously kind of other distractions outside that's kind of been in people's minds at the same time. So yeah, but that's fantastic. And as you mentioned a little bit earlier on, your new book, Fragile, is your first standalone book. And I was wondering, how did you find writing that with it being kind of having written the other series for so long, and this would be a completely new set of characters? How did you find kind of setting it, kind of writing those different characters?
I loved it. It was fascinating. It was, I tend to think that I don't so much sort of write characters as discover them. It sounds a bit odd, but when I explain it, it won't seem quite so odd. So I feel that's why we need the peace and quiet. That's why, you know, the lockdowns, certainly at the beginning, were so difficult, so that you can listen to the voices. So characters will talk to you. You just need to sort of, you know, have enough quiet times in order to let those stories grow inside your head and take form inside your head. And some characters, like some people, are just chattier than others, I think. And Marnie Rome was terrible. She was, you know, from my series, she was so parsimonious with her secrets. You know, it took me 6 books to pull them all out of her effectively. And the cast of Fragile is a little bit similar to that. So it was a question of discovering them as I was writing them. And because the book is full of twists and secrets and you know, discoveries right up and in fact until the final page, I felt I didn't really know the characters until I'd finished that first draft of the book, until I had reached that last page with the last surprise on it. But I love writing like that. I love writing to discover, to find the surprising things that your characters will do or won't do, you know, the things they refuse to do, which is, you know, so I love that. That's, you know, in some ways my favorite part of writing. It's a bit like meeting a lot of new friends, or you're not necessarily always friends, but, you know, it's discovering, it's ultimate people watching.
Yeah, I do find it really interesting hearing how authors can go about kind of creating their novels and creating their characters and things like that, because everyone is so different. It's always very interesting to find out. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about the book, so that you can give us a little kind of insight into what it's about and things?
Absolutely. So I was thinking about this actually, and I think for me, Fragile is a book about searching. So it's a book about searching for the things that we've lost, but also searching for the things that might be, that we might find. And it takes place largely in this strange, narrow, rather creepy old house in modern day London. And the house is Starling Villas. And it's described as being a sort of slipped between 2 other modern buildings, a bit like a love letter that's been hidden there. And this house is where my young heroine, Nell, goes in search of the young man that she's lost. And instead she finds an older man who may or may not be a terrible threat to her. And that's how the story opens, with these 2 strangers meeting one another in this very strange house and choosing to sort of trust one another in a way. But it takes a long time before we begin to realize who really might have the power in this situation and who should really be scared of whom. And that's the sort of book I love to write, a book where, you know, the reader is constantly guessing, and the clues are constantly emerging, and surprises, many surprises and twists along the way, I hope.
Yeah, no, there definitely is. I thoroughly enjoyed the book whenever I was reading it, and it did kind of take you by surprise every so often with a kind of little change to the story that you weren't quite expecting to happen and things like that. So you definitely managed to kind of get the twists and turns going through the story, like say, even up to the very end. The main character, as you say, is called Nell, and she does go through quite a lot of struggles throughout the book, but she's also quite a strong character, I felt, and I did think that I wondered if the struggles that she goes through is how she comes across as such a strong person. Do you think that's the case?
Yes, I think to one extent it is. So I found Nell quite extraordinary to sort of create and to write. And it's almost, in some ways, it's almost too easy to simply say that she's strong because she's had to be. I mean, that is true. She had this sort of upbringing without sort of proper love or care that we don't want to imagine that people that have. I mean, obviously, too many of them do. But it's the ways in which she chooses to use her strengths that I found made her really interesting to write and hopefully to read as well. So she constantly surprised me in the way she reacted to the things that I put her through. So we're always taught as writers, you know, you put your heroes or heroines up a tree and then you throw stones at them, you know, as the metaphor for how we are, you know, framing the heroic quest of our story, as it were. And Nell never did the things that I thought she would do, never reacted in the ways that I thought she would react. And that was really interesting. That really, you know, made her so compelling to write and hopefully to read. So yes, she's a fighter, but she's so much more than that.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, she does in the Starlings villa. She does meet an older man called Robin, and I found their relationship that builds in the book quite interesting because it's quite different from how you kind of think it's maybe going to turn out from their first meeting. Was that something that you were hoping that the reader might feel that it kind of it's a bit of a surprise kind of build of their relationship as the story goes through?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always set out, I don't plot my books, but I always set out to surprise my readers. Not only by, you know, writing, I hope, many authentic and credible twists, these sort of believable twists, but also I go out of my way purposefully to avoid obvious outcomes or obvious responses from my characters to the situations that I land them in. So your response is perfect in that respect. So Nell, as you say, Nell is employed by Dr. Robin Wilder as his housekeeper at Starling Villas, and he's a very odd man. He's a recluse. He's an academic of some sort, but Nell doesn't really know what sort to begin with. He just lives surrounded by papers and boxes, and he has this rota by which he insists the house is run. But Nell more or less manipulates him into giving him the job in the house. You know, she's in control of that bit of it because she's desperate to be in this creepy old house, which is the last place where her boyfriend Joe was seen. And she also needs a roof over her head because she's homeless at the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
And then to add an extra twist, she also has this compulsion to be needed. She has to be necessary to the people around her. And so she enters into this sort of old-fashioned servitude, if you like, to Robin Wilder. And she's washing his floors and his shirts, and she's making his meals, and she's making his bed, and she's really good at it. He starts to notice her. You know, he notices, first of all, that she's so quiet, that she's so efficient, that she's so neat. But he also notices that she's not afraid of him, even when he loses his temper with her, or she's just not afraid to be in this strange house with this strange man. And so maybe he's falling in love with her, but maybe it's something more sinister than that. It's, you know, it's the strangest seduction that I have ever written. And part of it is inspired by a film called The Servant from 1963, if memory serves correctly. So it's a film, it's written by Harold Pinter, and it stars Dirk Bogarde as the servant who completely upturns the household where he's employed. And so that was part of my inspiration. And Rebecca was also part of my inspiration, and to a lesser extent, The Handmaid's Tale, in terms of the relationships, between the characters in the book. But yes, definitely, I was after something that would upset the reader's expectations. I always feel you set a reader off down a certain path, and you want them to start guessing, obviously, but you also want to confuse and upset their expectations. You want to surprise them, so they start to feel comfortable. They think, oh, I know what's going on here. There's an older man and there's a younger woman, and but it's not what you think it is, and then it's not again what you think it was becoming. So that for me is the thrill of writing and the thrill of reading. So that's what I was definitely trying to do that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that she ends up at this house because she's trying to find her boyfriend Joe at the time, and he has kind of left her, I suppose, and followed another woman back to this house, and that's how she kind of ends up trying to get into the house in the first place. And whenever she does finally get into the house and discovers who the woman is, and there's obviously the older man Robin, and Joe's nowhere to be seen. I think that Nell struggles a little bit to understand the kind of the sort of connection between it all and what's happened. It's quite a kind of complicated web that's kind of been going on at that point in the story, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So it's not, again, and not only is it not what the reader thinks it's going to be, it's not what Nell thinks it's going to be either, which I think is crucial because she tells the majority of the story. And I think the thing to remember about Nell is that she's very young. She's only 18 when this story takes place, and none of her life experiences up to that point have been what we would call normal. So she was given up to a foster mum by her own mother when she was very young, really. And her own mother then went on to start a new family with a new husband. But she left Nell in the foster home. And then Nell, from the age of about 10, she became effectively mum to the younger children in the foster home, because the actual foster mum, Megan Flack, was not somebody that you would want to be your mother, not somebody that is overflowing with maternal instinct, if I can put it like that. And a lot of what Nell learned from that experience at that time was how to beware of the way people behave. And she doesn't have any natural points of reference for normal behaviors or normal relationships. And she's about 14 when she falls in love with Joe, who's about the same age, and he comes to the foster home. But by the time the story opens, she's discovered that Joe is, reckless and desperate, and he will do anything to survive. He's reached that point in his young life. She knows he went home with this older woman, Caroline Wilder, who she then discovers is Robin Wilder's ex-wife. But it comes as a horrible shock to her to be told what was going on in this house with Carolyn and Robin and possibly with Joe as well. So I think of Nell as being in some ways an old soul. She's quite cynical about things like love and marriage, but at the same time, she is very young. She's been desperately in love with Joe, and she's still seeking romance of some kind. She's easily sort of seduced into the idea of romance. And I think that those two sort of warring instincts in her are what make her vulnerable in one sense, but also in another sense quite dangerous, because she's being pulled in different directions. And so nobody in the house really knows what's coming when they think that, here's another young person has entered the house, but they don't really, they reckon without the person that Nell is. I think they don't realize what hidden sort of depths and strengths she has.
Yeah, definitely. And I do find that actually quite interesting about you saying about her age, because when I did start reading it, I personally didn't think she was quite so young at the beginning of the story, and it's not until you kind of get a little bit further and you do realise that she is only kind of sort of late teens.
Yeah.
So I think she does definitely have that sort of old soul kind of feel to her a little bit, even very early on, and you're kind of wondering where that came from. But and as you mentioned there, Carolyn is Robin's ex-wife, and there is also Megan, who is the foster mum you find out in the story as well. Definitely my two least favourite characters in this are in, and I hope you're not offended by me saying that, because I don't think they're intended to be likeable in any way. Which one of the two do you find the kind of least likeable person out of the two? Because they're two very interesting characters in a kind of unlikable way.
Yeah. Well, I'm a bit funny like this, so I don't hate any of my characters, and perhaps I should. You know, there's only one character I've ever, in all the 7 books I've written so far, there's only one character I felt was utterly irredeemable, and that's a character from the first book I ever wrote. I'm not a major character, a minor character. So when it comes to sort of Megan and Carolyn, the thing is, I love writing monsters. I always end up liking my monsters too much, and partly because they're such fun to write. I think any writer would agree with that. Writing your villains is, you know, there's a special something, a special frisson you get from writing villainous characters. So they are great fun to write. But I do deliberately try and give you at least something that is sympathetic or in each of those characters. So because like people, I don't believe that anybody is rotten through. Very, very few people are irredeemably rotten through and through. And even those people were children once, and you wouldn't have thought that they were rotten through and through when they were a child. So I always try to hold on to that little nugget. It's the grey areas that interest me. So is Carolyn Wilder a savage, sharp-tongued socialite who would like to grind Nell under her high heel? Yes, she is. But she's also a lonely woman who's grieving her lost youth. And is Megan Flack a horrible old harridan who treats children like disposable sources of income, and who is absolutely determined to wreak revenge on Nell for what she believes Nell has done? Yes, she is. But she also is lonely, you know, and she's afraid of dying alone in her case. So I think I can't really say which of them I find least likable, because I feel sorry for them to a certain extent, to each of them in their own way. They are both pretty awful people, and I wouldn't want readers to think that I didn't have a book with proper, you know, unlikable characters in it, because I think they're essential to a good book. You know, you need to have obstacles in the way of your heroes, and these two women are definitely that. But I think one thing I will say is that I do believe that at the end of the book, by the end of the book, every character, good or bad, has sort of got what they deserved, which for me is a satisfying situation to be in at the end of a book.
Although, like I say, they're probably my least favourite characters in the book, and because they do have that unlikable element to them, they do have that kind of vulnerable side to them as well, that you do kind of feel as you're reading it as well. Like, say, Callum does seem quite lonely, and Megan as well, like to that as well. So definitely it's something that does come across as well, as although they have the kind of those bad traits that you do discover, there is also that little kind of side of things that kind of pull them back a little bit, and do kind of pull its heartstrings a little, some maybe occasionally. So it's very well done. So another two good characters within the book. And one of the other things that I thought about the book as well, that it does kind of tackle and highlight a lot of the potential negative effects of being placed in foster homes and things like that. And was that something that you intended to try and highlight a little bit with the book, or is that kind of sort of a side issue?
Yeah, it's so it's in the sense that it's been a theme in my writing previously. I think to an extent, yes, but I'm always wary of making sweeping generalizations. And also, what I don't like to do is sort of hit readers over the head with social or political commentary. I think, you know, if it's there, if you want to find it, but mainly I think on a broader scale, what the book is about is it's about, I suppose you'd say, the cost of human frailty and the extremes, the extents to which any one of us might go in extremis in order to survive. And I also think, you know, that it's important to say that for many children, you know, foster care is absolutely essential. And many children thrive in foster care. But Fragile is not a book about those children.
Yeah. Definitely, and one of the children who is one of the more heartbreaking characters in it is Rosie, do you expect a few readers to kind of shed a few tears over Rosie once they discover her and discover her story and throughout the book?
I hope so, yes, because as you say, it is heartbreaking. So whenever I go to tragedy in my books, which I do, I think most crime writers do, I'd always approach it from the point of view of sort of telling the big emotional truths. I don't like gratuitous tragedy. I don't want, and I don't like gratuitous violence. What I always hope to do is to establish a connection between the readers and the characters, and to move readers rather than to distress them unnecessarily. So my great hope, I guess, is that Rosie really comes to life on the page, and that her tragedy will touch readers when they discover it.
Yeah, and I think it definitely will. It's a fantastic novel that has got a great set of characters all the way through it, and so many twists and turns, as you say. So I really hope that it does well, and when it comes out, and also our readers, whenever they get a chance to get their hands on it and enjoy it as well. So I hope it all goes well. How have you found launching a book this year? Because obviously it must be quite different launching a book in kind of the sort of lockdown scenarios that we've been in, rather than kind of under normal times where you might be able to get out and about and promote it a bit in a bit different way. So how have you found the kind of actual kind of launching a book in the current circumstances?
Well, I count myself very lucky that Fragile is coming out after bookshops, had reopened, and libraries too, because goodness, I've missed both, especially independent bookshops. I mean, I'm very lucky that I moved during lockdown, and there's two, not one, but two independent bookshops in the quite small market town where I'm now living. But I've only just been able to go in them. So we've been here for 3 months, and it's finally the doors are open, and it's wonderful to actually go in there. But other than that, I guess I would say it's been a lot of Zoom. It's been a lot of Zoom festivals. It's been Zoom interviews. It's been Zoom catch-ups with, my publisher team and my agent. Some of these have, in the grand tradition of Zoom, featured my cat. He can't quite exert himself to become an internet sensation because he's too lazy. I'm showing to you now, but he's sleeping on the sheepskin rug behind me, and he doesn't really like the bother of having to get up on a desk to actually physically appear. But he does wonder why I am talking to the wall, as far as he's concerned, for great lengths of every day. And he does. So occasionally he will get really annoyed and he'll start yowling around my feet, and but he will not. He doesn't like to be bothered getting up and finding out what it is I'm doing up here. But he's a lovely cat. He's Momo, and we wouldn't change him for the world. But yeah, that's the. I think we're all kind of zoomed out a little bit, aren't we? I mean, it's great, thank goodness for Zoom, because otherwise I think we would have all gone a lot crazier, a lot faster. But boy, would it be nice to be back inside a real library to do a chat to real readers.
Definitely. I mean, we have got big events planning throughout the rest of the year, and it's that kind of unknown about exactly what we can and can't do at this point. So we're kind of sort of almost planning for both, and seeing what the situation is whenever we get closer to kind of like Book Week Scotland time and things like that sort of stuff. So it's a strange thing for everyone. Yeah. So and I think like you say, Zoom has been or other kind of video conferencing things and things like that have definitely kind of been helpful for kind of just general life and kind of keeping things going, and also just for sharing cats, because my two cats do appear every so often as well, and also if my son's not at nursery, he's appeared in a few meetings here and there as well. But it's just how life has been over the last year, and what we've had to do.
It's been very human in that sense, hasn't it? I mean, that's been rather lovely, because we get glimpses into people's real human lives, as opposed to just when they're in their best clothes and on their best behavior, sitting in front of a crowded room full of people. It is a little glimpse into the humanness of all this, which I think it's been very good. I think we should cherish that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely something I think that we would like to try and keep going in some way and have continue some sort of digital element to our services and things like that, because it is a new way of working for us, and it's something that we would definitely kind of hopefully like to keep going in some form and stuff. So we'll see what the future brings in terms of that and things as well. Finally, just before we wrap up our wee interview here, I wanted to see what you have been reading, because we have been kind of telling readers throughout the kind of months about what we've been reading and what we've found interesting. But I thought it'd be nice to kind of get somebody different's opinion for a change. So, have you had any kind of outstanding reads that's kind of really stood out to you over the last few months that you would like to recommend to people?
Yeah, definitely. This is my favourite bit of every interview, is talking about other people's books. It's so much easier than talking about your own. So I absolutely love Erin Kelly's new book, Watch Her Fall, which is a sort of whirlwind thriller set in the world of ballet. And it has one of the best twists I've read in absolutely ages. I love When I Was 10 by Fiona Cummings, which is a really smart, really twisty, very human thriller. Fans of Jane Casey, I'm sure you have plenty of fans of Jane's. Her new standalone, The Killing Kind, out at the end of May, is brilliant, really astute and psychological, but also absolutely packed with twists. And right at this very moment, I am reading Laura Lippman's new novel, Dream Girl, which is just simply spectacular. It is fantastic. So, all fans of sort of noirish thrillers, and particularly, Laura's books, absolutely going to love Dream Girl.
Fantastic. There you go. So we've got some fantastic recommendations here, and of course, obviously, your own book, Fragile, to watch out for in the near future as well. So thank you very much, Sarah, for joining me, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. So there you have it, guys. Thank you very much to Sarah for joining me and doing that interview. It was a great chat with her, and I wish her all the best with the launch of her new book. It will be available on BorrowBox in e-audiobook form when it is released, and it will be available in our libraries as well to grab if you get a chance. So do check it out. It's a fantastic read, and also check out some of the recommendations that Sarah threw in there at the end as well. This is the end of the season 3 for us, so I hope you have enjoyed our podcast this season. We will be back soon with more episodes, so don't worry, we're not going anywhere just yet. If you have enjoyed this episode of the podcast, do leave us a little bit of feedback on social media using hashtag FLBpodcast, and we will be back again soon. But for now, guys, it's bye from us. Bye!